country. And again, also, we are looking at the government, a balance between, broadening of the tax base and actually also ensuring that there is economic growth. I look forward to have great discussions, of course, with my colleagues that we have in a panel. Thank you.
Bangula, what do you think of this budget?
Thank you very much, Mr. Migwi. First, I would say it is an ambitious budget compared with what we had in 2025, 2026. There is a significant increase on the budget estimate, which shows that there will be some gains, and some sectors will gain, other sectors they will lose. Whenever you are making a budget, remember there are sectors that will be given more money, and depending on the priority of the government, other sectors, the budget will be cut depending on the priority. But what I'm saying is there are considerations to cushion the citizens, and other areas there are some losses. So I think we'll be exploring further what are the gains to the common citizens and what are the losses. But I can basically say this budget is seriously favoring the education sector, which seems to be given a big chunk of the budget, followed by the security, and I tend to think the allocation security is due to the coming elections. The county government, they're also benefiting from this budget, getting huge chunks of money. But also, Migwi, you'll know that the treasurer has also given conditions to the county government to also make sure they pay the pending bills. So this money, once allocated to the county government, is not for the what we've been seeing happening in our county or devolved units. Then also there's a public service. We've seen the budget, almost over close to even 70 or 80% of the budget, let's say 70%, is going to recurrent expenditure, which is too high, to my point, because it's talking about 3.5 trillion shillings going to recurrent, paying salaries and the travel and all that. So I think this is an area where also citizens need to be enlightened on areas where the government is focusing on cutting of cost, so that now we can have a budget that goes more to development. When you look at, although we shall go deeper into this, that portion of the budget that goes to development, this is roads, water, health sector. It's close to around 749, although it's an estimate, a billion shillings. We need to see more of money going to development, because this is where impacts the citizens directly. Like when the roads are being completed, like in water projects are initiated, the ones that have been initiated, we see them being completed. It's another area. Also, it's capturing on agriculture and food security. We've seen the issue of fertilizer subsidies is still, I think, being considered in this budget. But as I wind up on this, my view on this budget, it also there's a huge burden on servicing of these loans. Because you can see 1.1 trillion will be borrowed money, especially local borrowing, which will also affect the citizens. When you go to a bank seeking money from a local bank, the interest rate might go higher, because the government will also borrow locally, huge chunk of this money. So to me, it's an ambitious budget, although there are some gains which we'll be looking into as we go on with our discussion, because when you look at the education sector, though it is getting the big chunk of the money, but also there is a proposed employment of more teachers. We've seen especially on junior secondary school, and also we've seen capitation will be as increased to schools. This to ensure that we've got high retention of pupils in school. There's also the issue of university education. I think looking at last financial year, we saw a lot of jittery and a lot of even demonstration with the university student, because the model or the formula that's all being used to give the money. This is the bursary fund and the education loans was not very well streamlined. But with the allocation to the education sector, guarantees that there will be smooth running. And you've seen universities now, they are actually running without much problems. There are no much strikes, because university now they can estimate, they can budget very well because of the assurance that is given by the allocation given to it. So there are some gains in this budget, and there are some sectors that are going to lose.
All right. There's definitely some gains and some sectors that are going to lose, just as Patrick Mbagula has stated. But I want us to get back to the figure, 4.82 trillion. When you look at this figure, for an average Kenyan, what does that figure actually mean? CPA Elias.
The figure of, thank you so much, Vivian. The figure of 4.8 trillion is a very, very big budget for our country. And the key thing here is how much are we going to raise for from the 4.8 million. And if, as a government, we're going to collect maybe, for example, 3.1 million, then how else do we get to finance the deficit? And remember, this deficit is either financed through taking debts, and through taking debts, that means that we're going to have much more burden on each and every Kenyan. And remember, currently all Kenyans, they feel that they're overtaxed. So it's all about how much we're going to raise from the revenue that we collect, and how much of the deficit we will have on this particular budget, and eventually how much of this will be cascaded to the common mwananchi who already feels taxed.
Isha Dunga, you know, currently the spending power of Kenyans has decreased. You know, this is evident that the spending power has actually increased. And looking at this budget and how big it is, how are we going to be able to sustain it? How is the common mwananchi going to feel the pinch?
Thank you so much. I would wish to start from the very lowest point, and that is my view on whatever this budget really constitutes. A budget of 4.82 trillion is quite ambitious, but I would be careful to use the word over, because according to the structures and measures that have been put in place, somehow we could be able to be convinced that it's achievable, but there are certain strains. So this budget is moving from a stabilization point to now a more strenuous, element in terms of our economy. Now, going and cascading down, how is this budget going to affect the common mwananchi? First of all, look at this budget from the point of the fiscal consolidation process that has been put forward to achieve it. We are going to raise approximately around 3.6, leaving us with about 1.1 trillion deficit. And then don't stop there. Just for me to break it down for the common person to understand, meaning we are looking at spending 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings, but then we are able to raise from our internal sources a sum of 3.6, meaning we must be able to borrow 1.1 trillion. Now, look at down after 1.1 trillion deficit, how much are we going to borrow locally, and how much are we going to borrow internationally or from the foreign borrowings? We are going to borrow about 900 locally and almost 148 locally, a difference of about 87% against around 12.6 something percent. Now, what does that mean? You see, the moving economy in terms of the financial services, when the government comes that heavily to compete in the private sector for the liquidity available, it starts to put the strain for the private sector, who are the majority employers. And therefore, when the government is promising the service providers in terms of the finances a lot of interest income, then there is going to be a shift in terms of preference for lending. When you look at that, it's going to result into serious liquidity mop-up. And apart from that, if we look at deeper, when that money has been gotten from this financial sector, probably in terms of pumping it back to the economy, there are certain circumstances, I would be very careful with my words, where money has developed wings within the pockets of the implementers, so that the money does not really sometimes find itself circulating around. And that starts to reduce the ability of the common mwananchi, number one, to access funds, because you become a risk. You become a risky borrower. The government becomes a preferred borrower. Number two, your spending power reduces. And then number three, that particular inclusivity becomes seriously affected. So this particular budget is affecting mwananchi in terms of the financial access at the very tail end. Number two, I would wish to say that the government has also given us a bit of promises in terms of how it's going to deal with these fiscal consolidations. Number one, it's promising revenue measures, and I'm happy about this perspective that they are broadening the tax base, meaning they are bringing very many people into the tax bracket to be able to pay. That one alone is able, to make us realize this budget through real collections that we are looking at. And then the expenditure reforms is another thing that I've learned that the government is taking care of. The expenditure reforms is coming up with something called the zero-based budget. That means justify that expenditure, not probably incremental aspect, whereby we are simply saying that this education sector got this much, and so we are increasing it by this percentage. Now it is going to be justify this expense that you are talking about. I think that is a measure of savings to ensure that pilferages are also reduced, coupled by the e-government procurement systems, which is going to ensure transparency. I believe that when we come to realize this budget, and that measure is going to make something out of it. And then, lastly, is the financing shift. Where we create an autonomous and independent financing points like the NIF, the National Investments Fund, which is a self-revolving fund, being able to motivate investors to put their money there, and that money becomes a self-sustaining model. And it becomes a point of creating massive infrastructural development that becomes a pinpoint in terms of economic development. When we look at whatever the samples that have been put across, we are seeing a lot of viability in financing those development through those autonomous funds that have been created. Otherwise, this budget, it is ambitious, not being careful not to say over, but when realized, we are going to see one of the massive shifts in terms of our economic development.
And Odongo, the Treasury does project continued revenue growth through improved tax administration. Dunga has said about expanding the tax base. But then again, for the ordinary Kenyan or the salaried worker or someone who is operating a business somewhere, should it be interpreted as a relief from new taxes, or just a shift from a shift towards stricter tax enforcement?
Thank you so much, Michael Migwi. I love what is going on, and I love the discussion that we are basically having this morning. I would want to digress a bit and say that the key thing, and as always, has always been when you have this budget, how feasible is the budget? Are we able to collect the revenue effectively? But at the same time, again, very importantly, are we able to tap the revenue? Are we able to tap the revenue to various areas perfectly well, so that the common man, the common mwananchi, can feel the impact of the revenue? I would say that when it comes to broadening of the tax base, the issue has never been the broadening of the tax base as it is, increasing the rates. When you talk about broadening, bringing more sectors into the tax bracket, and also increasing the rates of tax, as we will be able to see as we delve deeper into the 2026 finance bill. The key issue that underlies basically how broadening the tax base actually impact on the common mwananchi. Are we going to feel the impact? Is the common man at the ground really going to get the money. A lot of my colleagues has touched on issues to do with implementation of the budget. I'm very keen on the implementation of the budget. We say that for health sector, this amount is basically going to go to the health sector. We are saying that this X amount is going to go to the education sector, which we say that the education sector is going to receive a huge chunk of the budget. I'm very keen on the implementation. Very keen on the implementation. That is this amount that the government basically has set aside for that education sector. Are they going to implement? If it's hiring more teachers, capitation, hiring more teachers, is the common man going to feel that? That is the key issue. Yes.
A very important aspect you've raised about how the common man is going to feel that the budget, the implementation of it. But Bangula, maybe an ordinary Kenyans would want to know, in the next 1 year, will I feel the effects of this budget? Will I be at a better financial position than I am in 2026? What do you say to that?
Thank you, Migwi. Let me say, citizens, if they listen to us, they want to know what's going to impact their lives after these estimates are presented today in the Assembly. And one of the areas where the citizens are impacted directly is on the issues to do with the VAT also on day-to-day lives, especially on cushioning the citizens on the cost of life. And I can see from the estimates that are going to be presented today, government is considering not to slap VAT on essential basic products like food items, like bread, milk, maize flour. They have been all zero rated or exempted from paying the VAT. This means what? The prices of flour, the prices of unga, the prices of the basic commodities will not increase. So you do not need to spend more money when you go to a supermarket to pay for these goods because government has added VAT on it. So from the estimates that are going to be presented today, we saw that these basic food items, they have been exempted from the VAT. And it's a good gesture from the government since there have been outcry on increasing cost of the flour. It has been increasing, but with the recent rains and the harvest that we've experienced, we tend to believe the citizens, they will benefit. Another area whereby we also expecting to see some impact on the lives of the citizens, it's on green energy and technology, whereby we've seen the introduction of electric motorbikes, electric buses, solar batteries, and everything. The citizens are being encouraged because they have been been zero rated in this budget estimate, and it's to encourage this green energy, which is also a measure to conserve our environment, given that there's usually huge challenges that are coming with the climate change. And number two, it will also become affordable to buy these electric-powered vehicles and the motor vehicles. So that's another area which is also translate people paying less fares. You've seen fuel cost, the cost of fuel increasing. So the alternative source of transport, which now the government is encouraging the investors, those are investing in the motor vehicle sector, border sector, is to buy these electric-powered vehicles and also motorbikes. It will reduce the cost of transport, which is also translated to citizens paying less for cost of moving. Another area where these estimates they're also considering is on the medical supplies, especially on dialyzers. This is kidney dialyzers and equipment, and other select pharmaceutical equipment. We've seen the government has exempted them from VAT. So this means that people will be able, or the investors in the health sector will be able to get this equipment cheaply, and also government. This means when you go to an hospital for these services, you pay less because the cost of installing them will be affordable because of the exemption from the VAT. When it comes to small businesses, enterprises, we've seen also they are also gaining because initially the VAT registration was mandatory for those businesses that were having a threshold capital of around 5 million shillings. Now with this budget estimate, they say for one to be registered as a VAT organization or company, your threshold capital, it should be around 8 million. This means now we are going to operate our businesses with less pressure and unnecessary taxes from the government. So it's not a mandatory, but if you have the threshold capital, you are running a business with a threshold capital of around 8 million, you are required to register for payment of VAT, or you submit VAT. So holistically, when we look at this budget, we are going to see some impact on the lives of the citizens. Another area where we're seeing also kind of, we've seen the public reacting is on the digital money taxation, whereby we're seeing mobile money transactions and other online transactions being charged VAT. These are the people who are running these services. They will be charged, they will be required to charge, to pay VAT. What does this mean? Assuming it's a kind of a Safaricom, they will be required to pay VAT when I transact using their platform. This means the cost will be transferred to the citizen, hence making the business transaction also not cheap. And what we're expecting as citizens when this budget will be presented today is we want to know, does this VAT also affect when I'm sending money to my grandmother who is in the village? Will I be required to pay VAT, or will I be charged VAT on the same? And I want the CS now to be very clear on this matter, because it has been debated on many forums, and many forums people are saying, no, this VAT is on till numbers, and those who pay through the established platform, till numbers and pay bill numbers. But we want the CS to make it clear to the citizens who is affected, and how is it the citizens are going to be affected using this introduction of this VAT on mobile or digital money transfers. So I think there are some areas where we want the citizens now to engage in this conversation, because the budget is ours. Whatever CS is presenting the assembly, it is our budget, it is our money. And it's, we see the citizens are contributing. And I want citizens to know that this budget is talking about 4.86 trillion Kenya shillings. It's their money. It's their money, and we want to encourage the citizens to contribute, to participate, not to oppose, but to share views, even after this budget estimate is presented in the Assembly.
Very well put, Mbagula, Mr. Mbagula. And I want to get back on the exemptions, the tax exemptions, the VAT exemptions that we are going to be witnessing, especially on the basic food commodities, as you have mentioned, as well as in the health sector also. We have exemptions of VAT. And there are also no new taxes or major taxes that are being introduced. But the question is it realistic? Is it realistic for us to raise more revenue without introducing major taxes, new taxes? Ishadunga.
Yes, and I think that is one of the best ways through which a government can be able to ensure that they do not affect the life of the citizens, but still manages to increase their revenue. So yes, it is possible, number one, by exercising the austerity measures within the expenditure lines of the government, they are able to raise more money from there. Number two, when the government decides to broaden the tax base, that is a way through which they can be able to raise more money to cater for the budget. The only concern that I'm having with, let me finish first and then I'll give you the concerns. So by broadening the tax base is a way through which the government can increase the collections of the revenue to be able to cater for the expenditures that they're actually looking at. Then another one is that there are people that have been hiding in the tax payments, and bringing more clarity in terms of the amount of tax you pay and authenticating makes it possible that the government can be able to increase. For instance, today the government through the Kenya Revenue Authority has insisted that if you would want to claim your expenditures, then it is upon you to prove the expenditure, not the other way around, the way it used to be that you put the expenditure and then now that expenditure, you're trying to be investigated about it. No, you have to prove it, and that is through the e-teams. And therefore, that one alone is going to make a lot of taxes available for payment because of the fictitious expenses that people are claiming from their, tax returns and the tax filing perspectives. Now, I was bringing now the concern. I'm concerned about the performance of, the possibility of the performance of this budget in terms of the revenue collections or the realization because of the three areas. Number one, if you look at the statistics, currently, the collection is underperforming. In fact, in quarter 3, the government has underperformed by over 580 billion in terms of the 10-month target that they have been able to put. So what is the possibility that now going to the next financial year, now they are going to realize that particular collection? So even if we widen the tax base, but then we do not actually put forward some of the ways through which we are going to exercise the collections specifically, then it makes it very difficult to perform or outperform that particular budget. Number 2 is about the widening deficit. The widening deficit in terms of the amount of the GDP, in terms of the deficit by the GDP. When you look at it from last time, the last budget, we had 4.6% deficit of the GDP. But at this time, the estimate is already projecting a 6.4%. Meaning, that was the sole agenda of the government, to reduce the deficit in proportion to the gross domestic product. But instead it is widening, meaning there is a problem in terms of the collections and the expenditures alignment. So the fiscal consolidation program is not actually realigning with the overall agenda of the government in terms of ensuring that this is correctly done. Lastly, is about the implementation challenges. I need to bring to your attention, if you don't know, that in the last financial year, or the current financial year that is, the government has overspent from its budget by over 130 billion. But on the contrary, the government has undercollected. They have undercollected by almost 3 or 4% of their expected collection. What does that tell you? It means we are now at a precarious situation. We are not finding ourselves going to do these things in the right way in terms of implementing this budget. If at all, we do not take a serious and retrogressive analysis as to why we are underperforming in our collection. Could it be that we might have over-budgeted in terms of our income tax collections? Because in the whole overall collections, ordinary revenue income structure, income tax is the highest in terms of the income, about 1.3 trillion. But then in terms of the collections for this current year, the underperformance of that deficit that I'm talking about, the 130 billion, 70% has been contributed by the income tax deficit collection. Meaning, there is a problem in pay collection. There is a problem in income tax collection. What do you think could be the reason? Reason number 1 that I can be able to say is that we have got a lot of confusion within the tax regime, that people are not aligned with the tax policies. That makes it very predictable, easy, and convenient for taxpayers to be able to return. And therefore, the government must retrogressively analyze how they can be able to, number 1, achieve the target of the collections vis-a-vis the deficit that is continuing to widen. Yes.
All right. I hear you on that. Now, as you've mentioned, the government has been under-collecting, even looking at the previous year, which the year that we are closing off this month. Looking at it, they've been under-collecting, and right now we have an even bigger budget, and we are hoping to collect, without looking at the deficit of 1.1, we are hoping to collect and raise 3.6 trillion. And now they've broadened the tax base, as we've mentioned. and there's efforts to bring in more informal sector businesses into that tax net, into that tax bracket. And just how will, just from your point of view, CPA Mwinji, how are we able, or how is the government going to be able to ensure that they don't witness the same thing, they don't undercollect? And where do we go wrong when it comes to that? Is it that the public is not sensitized enough on how they should be, you know, paying or giving out their tax or paying their taxes? Just where are we going wrong? Are we not sensitizing the people enough? And what does this mean for the small trader and small entrepreneurs?
Thank you so much, Vivian. First of all, let me say that in as far as we may try to come up with a budget of whichever amount, then we need to be very, very efficient in the measures that we have in collecting taxes. And just to mention, it's not the first time, it's not the second time that the government has recorded this under collection of taxes, and therefore that throws a question of how efficient are our measures of collecting taxes. Because if we have this recurrent less amount of taxes being collected, then it means that we need to improve on our measures that we have. How efficient is KRA in terms of collecting taxes? How are they affecting the measures they are using to collect taxes? Because we can have a bigger budget that we don't have means to collect. So it's all about how we are sensitizing every trade, every individual within this country to have much more efficient ways of collecting taxes. And remember, I need to say this, that collection of taxes is not a problem as well for the citizens, but they also want to, or rather have a feel of how much value are they getting after this tax is collected. Because we have some countries, like for example Sweden, that have a higher tax base in terms of pay and also in terms of some other percentages of collection taxes. Like for example VAT, which is about maybe 24%. But you look at this country, the facilities and also the developments that are coming to this countries are very, very much okay, and citizens are very well contented that the government is working. That now throws a question to our country, Kenya. Yes, we do collect taxes, but as citizens, do we really feel the value of these taxes being collected? It's all about a question of citizens having trust in their government. Remember we said that tax that is collected, citizens need to feel the impact. So if citizens do trust the government, then definitely they'll have no problem paying taxes. KRA as well will not be having any problems collecting taxes. So it's all about how efficient we do collect tax, or how our systems are working, and as well how confident are citizens with the government.
Indeed, indeed. We are going to take a very short break and come back and continue with this pre-budget analysis that we are doing right here on KBC Channel 1. Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. You're watching pre-budget analysis of budget 2026-2027, whose framework is supposed to be presented later today by CS Treasury, that is John Mbadi. And now, when you look at this budget and then you pay attention to government spending, CPA Odongo, and then again pay attention to the fact that government revenue always comes from taxpayers, and a significant of that revenues goes to debt repayment. But then again, as a taxpayer who's watching you right now, should they be concerned that debt servicing is competing with allocations to very important sectors like health, education, agriculture. What do you think?
Thank you, Mike Migwi. I would love to take it back a bit and just explain some few concepts to a common man. Okay. Number one, the common man, does the common man really understand what tax is? And do they know that they're paying tax? For example, I would talk about one of the tax, that is a VAT. We call it an indirect tax. An indirect tax, is that, most citizens do not have even the civil consciousness that they're basically paying the VAT, which they do. Actually, when they buy commodities, it is not the seller that basically pays it is not basically the seller that pays, but a seller is simply an agent of the government in terms of collection of that tax. So number one, the citizens should basically know that they appreciate that they are paying taxes. They might not understand, for the bigger percentage, might never really understand they're paying taxes, but they are paying taxes. Number two, the second of it is the impact of taxes. When these taxes are raised, what is the impact of these taxes? A very fundamental thing. That whenever taxes are raised, it basically leads to increase in the prices of commodity that basically shift the burden, the cost of living on the common man. We are talking about issues of debt management altogether, debt management, and how does it affect? Because a huge chunk of this budget basically goes to a debt. You see, we have what we call debt sustainability, and believe me that there's a debt office in the country that basically needs to manage debt. That basically needs to manage the debt. My colleagues have talked about very important things, that when these taxes are collected, do we actually put them to good use, so that we make sure that whatever activities that we basically put the money in, does it generate money? It's just like a common man. When you put money into the business, your expectation is that the business should generate the money and the business should be able to cater for itself. As in our case, it has not been the case. And that's why we are very concerned, and we are also, coming in place and also, to our government that, at least as we move forward, that at least the budget allocation and the sectors, especially, there's one area that we talked about, development, because this is where we are going to get the money back to pay. That is, we put more money on development, but you also make sure that there are enforcement measures, there are enforcement measures that we collect enough revenue, and this revenue is not collected, because the common man is failing. When it comes to debt sustainability and paying the debt, it is the common man who is paying the debt. So that is a concern. That as we look today on the budget, and the budget is actually being read today, few things that we raise, measures that are put in place, that the government will put good measures in place to make sure that what is being collected is put to good use. And again, also, we need to shift on the aspect of development, that the money that is actually put to development, that we're able to raise, that in the future, we need to sustain our own budget. That is what we are looking up to, that in the future we can actually cover our own budget.
Okay.
And actually, before Mike, you take that away, CP Odongo, you've talked about the debt burden that we have as a country. And I still want to stay on that. And are we seeing meaningful progress in terms of us ensuring or working towards slowing down the growth of public debt? Are we seeing any meaningful progress on that?
In terms of the debt that has been taken, I would say that there is a number of things that are happening, but however, we really need to do much in terms of what has been collected, because a country needs to stem to a space where that it can basically sustain itself. So yes, there's at least some growth that the government is doing. We can't say that 100% the government is not doing something. We have, the housing going on, the projects that are coming, but we need to see, the common man. When you talk about the aspects of GDP, one of the things that we have, we say the shortcomings of GDP. Sometimes we can talk about the GDP, but the common man does not feel it. So those are the shortcomings of the GDP, and, again, also, they may not really reflect on the common man. So what really the common man is looking at, that the common man on the ground may feel the impact of this, that we may be able to get access to many staff, access to finances, that the common man can tap into this and also build on something that we can be self-sustained. Yes.
And Bangula, still on matters of debt and repayment, it's treated as a fiscal issue, but then again, from an accountability standpoint, how does the government ensure that people do understand how past borrowing actually delivers programs or projects, and does it justify repayment burden that the Mwananchi has to carry?
Thank you, Mike. I think our listeners need to understand as a nation, we've been struggling with the servicing of public debt, and with the time it has been increasing. And I can remember very well when the head of state came to power after 2022 elections. One of the biggest challenges and the elephant he had to deal with is to repay and service the pending or defaulted public debts. These are the debts that are incurred when government borrows either locally or internationally to meet the deficit in a budget. Like now, these estimates that are going to be read today, we have a deficit of 1.1 trillion shillings. That this means that with a budget of 4.82 trillion, government is not able to raise this money locally through the established means. This is like taxation. So it means it can only raise 3.6 trillion shillings. The rest of the monies need to be borrowed, either locally or with the other partners out there. So with this 1.1 trillion shillings goes to accumulate the already existing public debt that has not yet serviced or which government is servicing. Another challenge with this public debt is this budget we've read of to be read today, 4.82, it also includes component of servicing this public debt. It's like we are making a budget, we are borrowing locally to pay another debt that was there. So this shows the already past government, there are some austerity measures, there are some discipline that were not put into place to ensure that we can restrict ourselves to the ability of the resources that we have. And this is what we are expecting this current government to do. And we are supporting, from where I sit, I'm supporting this government because we've seen how this current government has tried to pay and service this public debt. And Migwi, let me say, I know one of the ways that government also cushions, because once this public debt is incurred, it's put a burden on the citizens. Also, government goes back again to cushion the citizens on ensuring that they don't feel so much pain in their day-to-day running. Like now, you can see like the cost, the VAT on the fuel. This budget has not increased the VAT. It has retained, and it will be retained at 8%. This shows that government is really encouraging, really supporting production. Another area this government is supporting this budget is stopping to subsidize consumption, but to encourage subsidies on production. This ensures that there is more production than now. When you, like now, what does it mean? Like subsidizing production. This means government supporting production, like the food sector. They make sure the fertilizer becomes cheaper. Then this ends to enabling the farmer to produce more in the market sector. And we've seen the serious changes. Like when you look at the maize production, the last financial year and this financial year, last year, when the subsidy on fertilizer was introduced, the farmers could produce around 44 million bags of maize. After the subsidy of the fertilizer, it grew to almost 67 million bags of maize. So this is what the philosophy of the current government, to make sure it's encouraging the citizens to produce by introducing subsidy on production and not on consumption. So this will really help in ensuring that there is really progress in the economic sector, and also helping these small industries and the small farmers not to be heavily taxed, exempting them on major taxation, not to pay a lot of tax or not to be exempted, not to be taxed on what is not meeting certain threshold. So really this budget is for the common manage. When you look at it, it's helping one way. And although government-wide is increasing and this kind of taxation, it is also helping the citizens and pushing the citizen by giving exemptions and tax, zero-rated taxes.
I want to get back to the fiscal deficit. That is the 1.1 trillion that is projected in this budget. And this is not something that is new. I mean, it dates back to even 10 years ago. Over the years, we've always had deficits when it comes to our budgets. So where exactly are we going wrong? What is amiss? Why is it that we don't get to a point whereby our budget is balanced, you know, and the money that we are supposed to use for that financial year is able to be raised, you know, by our citizens, or we are able to raise it by ourselves without, without having a deficit, and including, or rather increasing the public debt that we already have a burden of. So what is amiss exactly? Why do we always experience a deficit on our budgets? Isha?
Thank you so much. I will be able to give my points in terms of, let me segment it into 3 areas. Number one, there is no economy. In fact, very few have got a balanced budget whereby whatever they have got a surplus in terms of their budgeting. So it's not a very popular practice that an economy can be such a level whereby it generates what it can easily consume and then remains with a surplus. Very few economies probably are in that particular circumstance. But majorly, you have to look at our positioning in terms of economic growth and status. We are, a third world economy that is struggling to get into a second and then move to, the first world economies. And so it is expected that we will always have the deficit. In fact, what should be the most serious concern is reconciling the deficit versus whatever the developments that are actually following that deficit. Because when I talk about the deficit, we are talking about, as a government, we are planning to spend this much, 4.82 trillion. And if that money is spent within the economy, it widens an opportunity for serious economic growth, and especially if we do not take into consideration the 70.2% servicing the debt. I'm tending to believe that one of the measures through which this government is taking with this particular budget is to ensure a massive economic development through infrastructural development, investment in the energy sector, boosting the agriculture, and also looking at the finance sector. But there are very few economies that basically actually achieves that balanced budget. Number two, you also have to look at the developments and economic needs of a country. You know, our country is ambitious in terms of achieving the double-digit economic growth. And apart from that one, uplifting the majority from the level where they are to the next level. And that one is following the political mantra that have been placed, or the political agenda that have been placed by the current government, called the bottom economic transformation agenda. And if you look at that agenda, it positions the country in a level whereby our economic and development needs becomes so massive. But again, we are throttled by the heavy burden of servicing the debt, that there is just but no option except to increase the amount of the budget, or the level or the size of the budget, to cover for that particular realization of the agenda. And so that need of a country is also another reason as to why you can see an imbalanced budget where we have got a widening, the deficit consistently appearing. But then the government, number three, which is apparently something that is very important. The government has also to be a bit more careful when they exercise a widening deficit, and then they bring this in terms of the burden of borrowing. It becomes now a serious issue to the common mwananchi, to the businesses, when it comes to servicing these debts. Because look at it, 70.12% out of the 100% going to service a debt, whereby out of this 1.3 trillion in that is an interest, not only not the principal payment, is an interest. It tells you that we are in a perpetual situation that if the government does not take a very serious measure to curb this particular issue, then we shall be able to continue being dipped into a widening deficit that causes us to borrow more and more and more. But there is something that is very positive with this budget going forward that I must mention. That the government has decided to come up with certain ways of financing shift, whereby instead of borrowing, to be able to put in the infrastructure and then probably leave it at a point whereby we are going to have every government coming up to borrow, this government has decided to create a funding model whereby when the funding model becomes stabilized, we crowd in, not crowding out, but we crowd in capital from the market, we bring it onto this pot, then we ring fence it, then we make it to be reproducing through the implementation process. How does that happen? It happens that when the government collects money from the public, puts in that pot, and then put up a railway, for instance, they will collect at all from that railway, they will have proceeds from that railway that will come into that particular fund that will continue to revolve even past this government. To me, that is very positive in terms of ensuring infrastructural development and overall impact into the economic growth of our country.
And Mwinji, when you look at the priorities or the allocations, the proposed allocations that have been done on the proposed budget, what do you think? Are we getting it right?
Thank you so much, Mick. I would say somehow we are getting it right. But before I come to the right question that you're asking, I want to go back to the discussion that we've had, and
yes,
my colleagues have really contributed. And I want to say that even as we continue trying to fund our government to cater for better services and bring development for our country, we need to understand one thing, that Kenya is a country whose main source of collection is not minerals, is not oil. We need to realize that youth employment is a very key factor that will determine how well this country is moving forward. Because we need to change this from being a demographic menace to a demographic advantage. A case example is a country like Singapore that really invested into the airports, and this is what eventually brings development into the country, because you find when more people or more young people are employed, then definitely that's going to raise the tax base as well, and this is means that government will have to collect much more money for development. So it's something that we really need to look at, and also our policy makers, we need to look at our country. Why do we always think of going for debt instead of looking for ways on how we can raise revenues for the government? I can give an example of a housing levy that when it was introduced, it was all about we're going to have this money build houses whereby we're going to have affordable houses, but the just most recent discussion is that we're now going to use this money for collateral to collect more debts. Why do we always think of that? Why can't we even have the unutilized assets for the government being looked into, and then look for ways on how we can be able to raise much money from these avenues and bring the development of this nation. Now, back to your question, in terms of allocation, I think the allocation is somehow fair. Looking at the infrastructure, which has been allocated about 230 billion, that is the major key part that I'm going to focus on, because infrastructure brings a lot of development for this nation. Because a farmer who is back in the village, once they do their own economic activities, if this person is able to transport his commodities to Nairobi for a better market, then it opens up the economy. So once the infrastructure bit is well developed for this nation, then I believe we open up much more of our economy. We open up much more development. We open up much more employment for our people, and basically that is what will bring this country moving forward. Yes.
When you look at agriculture, the allocation given to agriculture, you know, there's a sector that employs millions of people, and you've just touched on matters of employment. Do you think this allocation is sufficient in a sector that contributes a lot to the GDP and also becomes a source of employment for people, and also by extension in ensuring that we achieve the food security that we need in this country?
To answer that, maybe I will want to say this, that currently what we are experiencing in our country, this allocation is not enough. I believe we could have put much more effort into the agriculture business, because we are now moving to a world whereby the informal sector employment is quite low. Yeah. And actually, if as a country, because we have very fertile land within our nation, if it's well utilized, then we can have much people being able to produce from the farms, and this will bring development. But one challenge I'm having is that sometimes we look and see projects being launched, but if eventually some of these projects which could bring much more development in terms of economic activities, farming, and anything that is agricultural based, coming to a stall, we can allocate. But let's also look at how much of these projects have been stalled, and why have they stalled. Was there money allocated? Yes. If the money was allocated, then why hasn't the project been completed?
It touches on accountability.
Yeah, it touches on accountability, because we can keep on allocating much more money, arguing that we want to bring about economic empowerment for those in farming, but eventually, how much are we able to account from this particular budget? Because we need to monitor each and every aspect of allocations. We can do allocations, but how are we monitoring this? If we allocate 230 billion, is the 230 billion reaching the common man who is doing farming? That is a question that we need to really answer. If the money is allocated, if the money allocated is not enough, I believe if we do it right, then definitely for this particular year that we are going, I'm sure if coming that other year, then this year's activities will contribute to our next fiscal year, and that is what will eventually bring growth. Remember, taxation for a nation is what brings growth once the government has money, but we need to focus on accountability, and that is now where the issue of corruption, how much of this money being collected is sinking down, how much of this money is going into people's pockets, and eventually making the just a common person suffer. So it's all about how effective, how efficient everything collected is being utilized.
All right. And on that note, we will be taking a short break, but we'll be back to continue with this conversation. And when we come back, we are also going to be going to the Parliament buildings, where our reporter Abdi Aziz is on standby. So don't go too far. We'll be back with more on budget 2026-2027. Welcome back. This is Good Morning Kenya, and we are having a pre-analysis of the budget 2026-2027 that is to be tabled in Parliament today later on in the afternoon. And speaking of that, we have our reporter Abdi Aziz, who is at the Parliament buildings. Aziz, if you can hear me, what are some of the highlights on? Give us some of the highlights rather on what is happening right now in Parliament.
Well, thank you so much, Vivian Degwa there, and good morning to you Kenyans as well. Today it is a critical day for Kenyans, given that the Kenya Kwanza administration before the 2027 polls will be, of course, tabling a 4.8 trillion budget before the National Assembly, of course, financing critical sectors from the education, health, agriculture and other key initiatives under the Better program being initiated or, of course, being implemented by the current administration. Now, of course, that particular fiscal year will be 26-27, and some of the critical issues that will be undertaken by the Treasury, especially the Exchequer, and here in the National Assembly, is that 1.1 trillion deficit will revise down the growth of projection, of course, surging oil prices, and 1.46 interest of trillions, and a pension bill yet pressing forward with an ambitious infrastructure, especially with the affordable housing project and other key projects being implemented by the government. You do know that this particular pledge by the president and other key ministers have been talking about implementing in various parts of the country, including to roads infrastructure, hospitals, including other key government institutions that are being built within the capital and across the country, will be, of course, being catered for by this particular budget that will be presented before this particular August House. Of course, education, which always is a critical sector in this particular country, always receives the lion's share of that particular budget, will receive the highest as always, given that that particular sector is very critical in some of the initiatives the government is implementing. You do know there are very critical issues that are currently facing the education system now. Remember that there's particular school unrest that have been witnessed, and you heard yesterday from the Cabinet Secretary of Education, that is Julius Migoso Gamba, in terms of the measures that the ministry will be implementing to ensure that they address the school unrest, the infrastructure deficit within the schools, and of course addressing some of the concerns of the learners and the tutors as well in those particular institutions, clearly stating that 204 institutions were affected by the unrest, and you know what that means. It will require budgetary allocation, including, of course, to cater for those particular issues, affected dormitories, laboratories, or any other facilities that were affected in the 204 institutions. Also, the care petition, which has always been a bone of contention, also being catered for through this particular budget, as well as the funding model under the universities and other tertiary institutions across the country. The healthcare sector expansion will also require financial muscle and support, and this particular budget will come in to strengthen that, especially through the Social Health Authority and other key initiatives the government is implementing through this particular budget. Of course, in and around right now in Parliament, before the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, who is currently addressing members of the Fourth Estate at the Treasury House, is expected here at 2:30. Security has been heightened in and around Parliament to ensure that that particular exercise is smooth. What we are waiting now is for the members of Parliament to start trickling in. This particular morning, before even talk to the members of Parliament, they're also held up in meetings and committee meetings, and once they come out of that particular committee meetings, we'll be talking to some of them, and in some of the key areas they expect the government to be financing through the 4.8 trillion budget expected to be tabled here this afternoon. Now, of course, in that particular budget, the Kenya gross expenditure of 4.8 billion, which is a 69.3 billion above the February budget policy statement, ceiling adjusted upward the salary shortfalls and development partner. Now, yesterday, the Control of Budget Budget, that is Margaret Nyakango, was able to release budgetary performance of the national government for the last 9 months or so of the fiscal year of 25-26. And some of the issues she brought out of that particular 418-page report is the issues, some of the challenges is procurement of goods and services, and over-reliance of Article 223 of the Constitution, where the national government as well as the county are always asking from the consolidated fund, of course, through the control of budget and the treasury, to be allocated more budget despite being budgeted for in the budget of 25-26. And those were some of the issues the control of budget and the Auditor General were raising, which we also witnessed at the start of January, where many MDAs as well as SAGAs were coming before the Departmental Committee of Budget as well as the Departmental Committee of Budget in the Senate, coming to ask for more money from the August House in terms of supplementary budget, including the House on the Hill, State House, also the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Education, through the supplementary budget to finance some of other critical sectors. They're saying they have been having a shortfall. That is why the control of budget in that particular report is saying that the administration is over-relying on Article 223 of the Constitution. Now, from the Consolidated Fund Services, this stands at 1.5 billion, a staggering 31.2% of the entire budget, with a domestic interest alone at 986.7 billion, which exceeds the full education budget, which was 668.3 billion. Now, of course, that particular issue of the Middle East, we know what has been happening there. It has been a major topic in this particular country on how the government is able to, of course, cushion Kenyans against the adverse effects of what is happening in the Middle East, especially through the fuel prices in this particular country. Now, this particular defining new risk, which has seen crude oil trade at USD 100 per barrel. Of course, the government has come in to reduce the VAT on fuel and pushed the inflation, of course, to 5.6 and caused the GDP growth of this particular revised down from 5.3% to 5%. You do remember Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that is John Badi, as well as the president of this particular nation, revised down the VAT on that particular vital commodity to caution Kenyans against that particular incidents that are happening in the Middle East. Now, the development expenditure, which also is expected to have a chunk of this particular budget, which captured in the budgetary summary, has a ratio of 29.0%, which falls below the statutory of 30% of the PFM Act, and the Treasury openly acknowledges this particular bridge. Of course, talking about that development is required. You do know that major roads as well as major infrastructures that are currently been undertaken by this particular administration ahead of the 2027 polls is required to be financed ahead of that particular endeavor. Now, the public debt, which has always been an issue that has been cropping up when the Treasury Cabinet Secretary appears here before the members of Parliament, remains at 65.3% of Kenya's gross domestic product against a 55% statutory ceiling. And of course, the convergence of path does not reach the compliance within the budget's medium term. Now, of course, for the 2026-2027 budget, the government is mostly externally disrupted since that particular effects of the COVID-19 since 2020. The country and its physical structure is still reeling from those particular effects. And of course, what is happening across the globe, especially from the Middle East, those are some of the factors that needs to be considered in the contribution of this particular budget. And also, members of the Parliament, given that we are headed into an electioneering period where many of them will want to hear is the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IBC, which has been seeking billions and billions of shillings to ensure that they get funds to fund the 2027 elections. And of course, that is what they have been talking about in that particular sector. Now, I am not alone. Some of my colleagues are also around. But before I go, members of Parliament are also seeking, we're speaking to some of them, they're clearly stating that they're focusing on what IBC is said to receive. You do know, when the Erastus Ethicon Commission arrived in Parliament and talked to members of the Parliament, they were seeking to not only finance new kits, given that the opposition didn't want the KIMS kits that were used in the 2022 polls. They want newer KIMS kits that are expected to carry out that particular 2027 general election. Now, I do hear that we have some of our colleagues prepared so that you can also listen from there. And we have one of our colleagues at Treasury, and also will be hearing from the people who will be inside, of course, inside a crowd here in the capital. Let's move on there and listen in as well, Vivian.
Head to Treasury get to continue with this conversation. Before we get to that, thank you so much, Hashim. And we'll be keeping tabs with Hashim as he is at the Parliament buildings. Now, we are having this analysis specifically for our viewers. We are having this analysis specifically for the common mwananchi, so that we get to understand what this budget, the financial year, for the financial year 2026-2027 is all about. What does it have in store for them? And with that said, maybe Mr. Mbagula, what are the key indicators, or what are some of the key indicators that Kenyans should be looking out for or listening into?
Thank you, Vivian. This budget seems to be quite comprehensive, because it's covering education, infrastructure, health. It's also covering the entire of the vision of the current administration, that is a bottom-up economic transformation agenda. But more to say, the youth, our youth in the country, they have not been left behind in this budget estimates. And we can see the estimates are providing close to 12.5 billion Kenya shillings to fund National Youth Service. We know how important the National Youth Service has been to our nation, and also supporting our youth in the recruitment, training our youth, and also deploying them. This has been factored into. There's also this new program with the current administration of Nyota. There is a provision for that. And we've seen so many youth that have benefited with these Nyota programs, where it has supported the youth in training them on basic entrepreneurial skills. And so many of our youth have started some enterprises, and they are running business. Personally, I know, and the youth that I've interacted with, they have been allocated some money, around almost the estimate of 4.7 billion. We've also seen another very interesting program that has been introduced in this current budget estimate, that once our youth graduate from university, what we call internship, not attachment, the government is providing close to 2 billion to make sure this youth, once you finish, you graduate from university, you are looking for internship program, the government will organize it for you. There's also payment, so when you finish your college education, you don't go out there and start tamarking or start competing with even experienced people that have been out in the market. Definitely government is cushioning our youth to make sure they get these opportunities whereby they're exposed to the industry and they get this necessary training for them. So this, I can say the government is for pro-youth and to support our youth. And I would want to encourage our youth to look into this keenly, the budget, because government deliberately want to support our youth. And this is very interesting, because 70% of our population comprises of young people. And if the government is not supporting them, to be disastrous. But this is a very nice move by the CS for the finance, Honorable Mbandi. Let me also say, the issue of affordable housing, it's creating job opportunities for our people. And most of the people that are benefiting from this affordable housing program are our youth. When you look at keenly this budget component, I want our listeners also to know, in promotion of digital skills, the government deliberately is setting aside money to build ICT hubs. I think when you look at the previous financial year, you saw so many ICT hubs have been constructed. So there is also the move of this current administration to put more ICT hubs where our people can go, access internet easily. They're able now, with this access to internet that is affordable, they're able also to do these online jobs and get some income. This government is moving to the village level to ensure even the people in Mashinani, they are feeling the impact of this government. Also, government is moving with the speed to make sure the Konza Metropolitan Data Center is completed. It has been given some money. Another interesting component in this budget, we've seen this introduction of labor migration and export program, whereby we are seeing a national employment authority going international and securing job opportunities for our youth. Now we've known, not necessarily you have to work in Kenya you can access these job opportunities even out there. And government is allocating this entity some money to make sure if you're interested in working outside the country, the government will facilitate you in ensuring that you get your passport in real time, secure opportunities on the other end, and make sure these opportunities are also negotiated well to avoid the instances where our people have been mishandled, especially in the Middle East. So I can say, Vivian, this budget and to our listeners is for our youth. And we really need to support it. We see that is go through. And you can also note the government has restrained itself not to introduce new taxes. What government has done, it has become more innovative in ensuring that the infrastructure, the project are carried on without releasing this burden to citizens. And I want to echo my friend here. He mentioned the special fund that the president launched the other day, whereby we are government is sourcing money from entities and through doing privatizing some entities to make sure we generate some income. Also, you can see government is very innovative in generating income through PPP. This is public-private partnership programs, especially when you look at water sector. When this government took over, it had estimated that we want to spend 1.76 trillion shillings in building water infrastructure works in the country. This money cannot be put into the budget, it will overburden this budget, but the country needs water. We need to see roads. We need to see facilities coming in. You can see this is a Rironi road that will be constructed using a PPP program. We've seen the railway expansion on a PPP program. We are building dams through PPP program. So with this innovation, the government, the shift now should be not putting so much burden, direct burden on overtaxing the citizens, but also ensuring, because government is obligated to carry on the project. So the government is looking for alternative ways to ensure that the project are implemented with a minimal burden to our citizens. I think it's a good budget, I can mention that, on the aspect of supporting our youth in the country.
Before we come back to this conversation, we have to be told that there's a link from the Treasury where the CS Treasury, that is John Buddy, is addressing the members of the fourth estate. Once that is ready, we shall be receiving that link from Treasury buildings. But Ken, when you look at devolution, there has been a bone of contention in terms of how much is allocated in every budget cycle. But this year, the allocation has risen to around 40 billion. Is there a way that even taxpayer can believe that another increase in county funding will produce different results in terms of service delivery?
Thank you so much, Migwi. Actually, at the beginning of devolution, what was at the heart of the common man was really a shift from Nairobi being the hub of everything to actually go back to our counties where we can get the same things that we get in Nairobi. However, number one, more money to the county, that's a plus. More money to the county, that's a plus. That's a plus to the common man and to the common man. However, again, I'm happy with the implementations that are going on, that currently the government is putting in place, having the money, having electronic system, monitoring how money flows. However, there's still more that needs to be done to the counties in terms of implementation, where we need to have this money basically being channeled to development. Because in as much as money has been going to the county, we still see there's not a shift of many people to the counties. And again, if you look at even the county itself, those who work in the counties, there's still not much that has been done. So I think it boils again to the implementation and accountability, that if this money is going to the county, then we need to have systems in place that are basically proper to ensure that that the money that is allocated to the counties is actually put to good use. However, it's a good thing that money goes to the county. We need to have implementation.
Allow me to cut you short. We cross over to Treasury, where the CS Treasury is addressing members of the fourth the members of the Fourth Estate. We can get that link right about now.
Not really, they are not surprised independent. You know, the constitution we have today is robust and changed the way. Today is not maybe in the 90s or early 2000 up to 2010. Yeah. The budget estimates the revenue raising measures are with the public from 30th of April to date. What maybe Kenyans will be listening to is the details of these revenue raising measures and budget highlights. So there is really no surprises, just giving more details on what it is that is in the budget estimates.
Right,
and
so, yeah, this is your second budget as the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury. When you look at your first budget and this second budget, how difficult or how easy has this one been?
Well, there is no easy budget. In fact, this year's budget is even informed by a number of challenges, one of which is the external shock that we are facing. You know, now we have a war in the Middle East, and that war is completely disrupting the world economy. And so we are preparing this budget in the backdrop of a major external shock, what is close to be called world war. And so there are a lot of uncertainties, and again, underperformance in revenue collection, the rising inflation. That's a major thing because we are preparing a budget at a time when the inflation is rising. Last year it was different. Inflation was contained. Today it is rising. So this budget is more challenging.
All right, for a lot of Kenyans, they'll be looking at some of the food commodity prices that will be brought down. But the question that I want you to know, in terms of the sectors that could generate a lot of economic activity, a lot of jobs, are you doing something around that?
Yeah, of course, we are investing quite significantly in agriculture as the backbone of our economy. Remember, agriculture is also largely devolved, and I think that is also something that we are missing in our discussions when we talk about underfunding agriculture. Agriculture is heavily devolved, but the government is coming up with interventions to support a number of crops, both for food consumption and exports. Like tea, you can see in the past 2-3 years, the government has invested a lot in the tea sector. We have also invested a lot in the revival of the coffee sector. We have invested a lot in edible oil, and I will speak to that in Parliament. We have also invested a lot now in the sugar reforms and many other crops. But again, in food production, you can see the efforts that the government has put in terms of subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, provision of seeds has helped us in increasing the quantity or the amount of food or maize, which is our staple food. Yeah. The production of maize has gone up. Well, we have also been lucky that the weather has been favorable, but the government's intervention is clearly visible and evident. Right, so that is for agriculture.
Yeah, one final question for me, Waziri, is when you look at, just looking at the...
Yeah, that is the CS Treasury, John Buddy, earlier speaking to the members of the Fourth Estate regarding the budget that he is set to present at Parliament buildings later on in the day, and we shall be bringing you that live coverage right here on KBC Channel 1. Now, Dunga, I don't know what you make of the comment of the CS, especially when it comes to agriculture. He has said that the government is investing heavily in agriculture, even though also that the agriculture is a heavily devolved sector. What do you make of that?
I would wish to say that on paper and also verbalizing this, they are very brilliant, and I can attest that one of the proposals that have been made through this budget, and even if you get to hear from that comment, is making us that even if we would simply achieve more than 70% of our proposals within these budget allocations, then our country would be far much ahead of whatever the place we are in currently. And let me break down that agricultural part for you. I would want you to condescend your thoughts to, I think, sometime back last year when there were complaints about importation of rice, and yet there was rice in Mwea that were still in the stores, and people were not being able to sell their rice. And that is already stifling agricultural productivity. Why do we import? This government today, in this budget, we are now talking about becoming a net exporter as opposed to being an importer, a net importer. And so, with the good policies in place, there is only one problem of implementation. If we can be able to look at the implementation part, it will be better. So in the agricultural sector, let me get down there now. The government has basically allocated, I think, about 18 billion in terms of the funds to be able to use in stabilizing the agricultural sector for the purpose of ensuring that we become a net exporter. And this is how this thing again breaks down. And I like the brilliance in it. One, there has been subsidies to the seeds so that the farmers being given the seeds will make it very easy in terms of reducing the farm input costs. Go also to the fertilizers. The fertilizers have also been subsidized greatly to ensure that farm input costs have also been reduced. Then something that makes me happy is about the 10% excise duty on the imported agricultural products. Coming down from it was 15%, but these things now it's 10%. Now that is a motivation to import, and I think somebody can be able to say that is encouraging importation as opposed to exporting. In fact, it's encouraging some of the big millers to get maize from outside the country to use for milling, and therefore it's going to render now the local farmer to have their maize rotting in the stores. But there's a rider which you need to understand. Before a miller imports, you must have exhausted purchase from your local quota, meaning there has to be a proof that you've been able to purchase from local setup or the local producers, and it is over.
Who enforces that?
You see, now we have got what we call the government policies, but then now it cascades now into what we call regulations. It is now when they come up with the regulations that guides that is when the enforcement, because that's why I started by saying that the enforcement and the implementation becomes the issue. We have got very brilliant ideas, verbalized and on paper, very nice. But when it comes to implementation, if the government can increase its credibility in implementation, then I tell you the trust of the mwananchi, the trust of the investors, and the trust of the various stakeholders are going to be improved. And basically, if you look at that particular assessment, in that agricultural importation, if you don't buy from the local quota and finish, that is an issue. But again, even when you're buying, they have gonna put ahead another rider. And that rider is you must buy at a specific price, meaning there is what we call capping of the price. Lastly, Mike, there is what we call the county agricultural integration, industrial parks, which is coming to be a very serious game changer in ensuring that the impact of industrializations of our country becomes enforced and becomes realized. I will delve into that one later on. Yes.
All right, now the reading of the budget for the financial year 2026-2027 is not just set to happen in the country. It's not happening in Kenya alone. This will be happening across East Africa. Now I'm thinking, for an investor who is following up closely on this, is our budget, or is it inviting enough for an investor following closely to have their eye on Kenya and decide that this is where they want to put their money? CPA Elias?
Thank you, Vivian. One thing I would like to say about investors thinking of whether to invest in Kenya is that investors look for places whereby they will get value for their money. So it's all about the question of is the taxation reliable? Like, for example, we are having a VAT being changed. if today I do my progression on my my business that I want to do in Kenya, and then it happens that probably today the VAT is 16%, and then come 2 years later, VAT has gone up to 18%. It's really a question to ask myself as an investor, am I really going to do this investment? Because once we have these fluctuating taxes every now and then it chases away investors. So it's all about the question of, is my money safe? Am I going to get value for my money? So and after that, I want to say something about agriculture, because it's quite a discussion. And I want to mention on the issue of moving the animal feeds and also things like sugarcane products from zero rated to VAT exempt. Having items as zero rated means that this cost, that is the tax, is zero, and you can claim this amount from the revenue authority. But what is happening is that these commodities are being now moved from zero rated to tax exempt, which means that if I am a producer and I happen to produce these goods, then it means that I definitely cannot claim this VAT. And consequently, what happens now is that I'm going to transfer this particular cost of producing this good to the consumer, which eventually will raise the cost of the final products from the farm. And now this brings about another question. We might say today we are reducing pay, and this will increase the disposable income to the economy. But are we also doing something else as a government, which is now going again to erode this disposable income? So this is all about coming into terms of what we are doing from this one end and what are the net effect on these other ends. So I believe that those are also some of the things that we need to be very, very considerate. And lastly, I want to touch on Nyota Fund that my colleague really mentioned. I believe the government is doing good in Nyota Fund. And one key thing that people need to understand, or someone who is listening needs to understand, is that it's always said that you can never make someone poor rich by giving them money. I believe our youths are very well educated, but now the approach with which the government does this thing will eventually bring either a good effect or a bad effect. If we are giving money to our youths, how are we monitoring this? Are we just doing it on just a simple basis, or are we also doing it on youths that have good business plan, that have good ideas, and how well can we mentor them in terms of probably giving them the startup capital to have the activities running? And then it's not only a question of just giving. Are we monitoring the progress? If we can monitor this progress very well, and then have out of 10 youths that you gave Nyota Fund, among them, how many of them have successfully implemented what they tabled? So as a government, I believe some of these efficiencies and ways of coming up, monitoring what we are doing as a government, holistically as we come to the next financial year, really plays a key role in what you're doing as a government and to the citizens. Thank you.
And Bangula, there's something that we have to be alive to: governance and accountability in as far as public finance management is concerned. You look at our budget, we are approaching the 5 trillion mark in coming years, and every year we have Auditor General giving reports of unsupported expenditure, procurement irregularities, and also stalled projects. You know, a Kenyan would ask, why should we have, or why should Kenyans have confidence that this budget will be managed differently?
Thanks, Mike. Before I respond to your question, I want to digress a bit and put clarity on the issue of Nyota.
Yes.
Nyota is an empowerment program that government, in partnership with external support, they have deliberately designed to help our young people. One, it starts with the capacity building or training our young people on how to become entrepreneurs, on how to start businesses, and how to manage your business until it becomes affluent or profitable. And this training was done, the phase one, you know, our people went around training our young people in all the counties. Then the phase number two, it began now by supporting these young people, because ideally the people that they do not have employment, they have no source of income, giving them small or little amount of money to start up or to implement what have already been trained on. And there is a monitoring progress that is being done to make sure these young people, once they have been given money, they have gone to start a business, the follow-up is being done. There is that department that securely is doing that. It's not just giving them money. No, we are following them, government is following them to make sure that the money that has been disbursed to them, it's now been put to business and to come up with a success story of this program. So soon I think Kenyans will be seeing that. That's why government has still allocated 7.7 billion shillings. Mike, accountability is very key in every government. And really there are measures that government is putting into place to ensure that there's prudence in expenditure of government resources. Like there was a communication that government is reducing on unnecessary expenditures, especially on foreign travels, where a senior officer will go out of the country with a big delegation. And this has already, there's a circular that has been issued to make sure it's only essential government trips that are funded. And that's why we are seeing there is no major budget that has been given on travel or international travel. We want this international travel to be reduced, and if there's any training, need to be done locally, so that now we save on the money for the citizens. We've also seen the government is very deliberate in ensuring that institutions that are supposed to protect the citizens, they have not been interfered with, and they have been funded very well. In the budget, we've seen EACC, we've seen the court system, and I think you can see the other regimes, the court have been crying, they have been denied money. This is making them not to build their capacity to prosecute the cases that are given to them. But with this budget, we've seen there's adequate funding for judiciary, there's no outcry, there's adequate budget to our security system, a lot of money, there's adequate budget to our EACC, which is our watchdog on economic crimes. So the government is not marshalling these institutions, giving them free hand, is funding them adequately, so that now they can exercise their mandate without feeling that they are underfunded. And this is a deliberate effort to ensure that our resources, our resources, our monies that we release are well safeguarded. This system also is also ensuring that once these cases that is a crime on economic crimes are brought, government is not interfering. That we've seen counties, they are like the recent case of Nairobi County. Government is not saying you are working for this governor who is for the government. No, government is giving free hand to fight corruption. And this is very encouraging. And I can tell the citizens that our president is not joking on this. We're seriously funding this institution like in DCI, that is in charge of investigation, NIS, and all these EACC, they are well funded. And this gives credibility and trust to the citizens that they are well guarded and their resources will be used optimally and also in a prudent manner.
Yeah. And still on matters accountability, I'd still want to follow up on that. Maybe from your point of view, maybe CPA or Dongo, you can take this. What mechanisms or measures should be put in place to ensure that, you know, citizens are also able to monitor they are able to monitor the implementation.
Okay. All right. I'm told your mic is off a little bit. But Ken Odongo, on matters accountability, the same way as Vivian has put it, what mechanisms need to be put in place to ensure that even if we are setting these budgets, accountability takes center stage?
Sure. Thank you, Mike and Vivian, for that wonderful question. I think when you talk about accountability, the norm has been that accountability is basically on the government side. So one of the first things that I want to say that accountability is both two sides. Accountability is on the government side, but at the same time, accountability is on the citizen sides. Why do we have issue to do with public participation where we are able to raise a voice? So as citizens, again, it's also very important that we have to raise a voice on areas where the government does not do their job properly. Then we need to step up and make sure that those issues are brought to public. We have seen peaceful picketing, where the public goes to on the street and saying this is wrong, and that needs to be carried on. But again, I would also echo on the government side. Vivian talked about something that I would want to go back interestingly. He asked a very good question that the public really needs to. Why is there rising public debt? One of the reasons is a lower tax collection. We had issues to do with overspending, government basically overspending. We had issues to do with economic shocks, so we have issues to do inflation. But again, how do we correct this again? That was also something that you asked on again. You see, the government would do, what would the government do? Incorporating PPP, that is public-private partnership, where they're able to share on the risk factor with the private sector. We had issues to be broadening the tax, but we mentioned very importantly going back to the accountability, enforcement, even the government on its side, to ensure that there's enforcement in terms of revenue collection, so that we don't have to go back to borrowing from outside or borrowing internally. So that has to be a two-way thing, that the government has to play its part in terms of ensuring that the projects that are in place, needs to be in place, but also the public in itself also have a voice in this public participation, but you also have a right also to continuously make the government aware that, what we funded through the taxes needs to go to the right channel.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, gentlemen, we have less than 4 minutes to wind this up, so I'll give you each maybe a few seconds to give your closing remarks, and I'll start with you, Dunga.
Thank you so much, Mike. I would wish to say that the government is rightly ambitious in terms of ensuring that they cover the special and the ordinary needs of each and every citizen. Through this budget, I believe that there are a lot of things that need to be done in terms of the implementation's scrutiny, and also in terms of monitoring the progress. But ideally, I would also bring to our attention the attention of the citizens that let's also look at what opportunity lies for me as an individual, as an investor, as a business person,
yes,
as an employee within the sectors. What is the opportunity that is there for me? You look at the allocations within the energy sector. The government is now looking at prioritizing agriculture and mining as the top, producers to make us to become a net exporter.
Yes.
What opportunities lies for you as a citizen there? What can you put there? Look at this budget from a perspective of what you can gain and the positive impact it can be able to bring to you as a citizen.
And the opportunity.
Yes.
Mwinji.
Yes, as an economist, I view this budget as an attempt to strike the balance between government raising revenue and also bringing about economic development. And what I will like to say is that the key success of this will not be measured by how much we collect as a government, but how much effect are we having on the whole nation in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of employment, in terms of ensuring that every citizen receives the good services and that they get the value of their money. That is basically what measures the government needs to do, that, and that only taxation only needs to act as a vehicle to drive these developments.
Indeed. Bangula.
Thank you, Mike. Let me say this budget is quite affecting the Kenyans in a positive way. And I really want to encourage our young people to tap on these opportunities that are coming with these budget estimates, which will be read later today, and they capitalize on these opportunities. There is also another opportunity of the affordable housing, where government is also giving huge chunks of money. This means the government really wants this housing sector to thrive, and also the citizens to benefit. And the good thing with this is it's not discriminating in terms of your levels of income. From the lowest person who is earning or able to pay rent of 3,500 to the ones that is able to earn 200,000 per month, you are able to own a housing unit wherever you are in the country. So please, let's take this opportunity. This money, these houses are being built with the taxpayers' money, so it is your houses. Don't say this is for a particular regime, it's for all of us. Please go and secure yourself a house. And then also citizens, let them become also accountable. As much as we want also to put government to be accountable, also we citizens, we need to be accountable. And especially, you can see we are headed to elections in 2027, where IBC has been given 74 billion Kenya shillings. Most of the people that decide on how this money is going to be expended, and how this money to be allocated, are elected by you citizens. All right. They are the people that come to you and elect them. And to say this, let me also put a special regard to my people, especially my interest in Nairobi, because I've been a leader in Nairobi, and I've also been elected in Nairobi City County. Okay. That once some of us can get to an office, because I'm aspiring governor, come 2027, some of these things will apply them, not just talking.
All right. Okay. Odongo.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike, Mikwe, and Vivian, for this opportunity. I would say the budget has two sides, There's the positive side where we, where the funding goes to the infrastructure, attracting investors. But there's also the other side where the budgets push people to the corner, especially on areas we have not been able to fully look at it. The rates that are increasing, the withholding taxes that have emerged, the VAT on digital services. In as much as the government basically is enhancing, broadening of the tax base, there's need for a balance, striking a balance between expanding the taxes and economic growth. That is what the citizen needs to look at.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. And this is where we put a close to this conversation. But remember, our team is on standby at Parliament Buildings, and we will be bringing you that live broadcast when CS Mbadi gets to table the financial year 2026-2027 budget. Do enjoy the rest of the week. Goodbye.